A couple things here. Just to start off with, I wanted to comment. I had seen you, Deb, at the RIGA meeting, and RIGA did pass their ordinance onto their board. It was kind of interesting, though, that there at the final meeting they decided to reduce the setbacks significantly, and also change the measurement marker that they were using. So that their ordinance that they've used basically the entire time here for the last 4 or 5 months, the one that the public commented on back in early March, is not the ordinance that we voted on the other night and passed on to the board. Most significantly, they changed the setback from being from the property line. I think the initial thought being that if someone had property, they wanted to be able to subdivide it in the future, give 10 acres to a family member or something to build a home or something, that they would then also be able to have a choice whether or not they would be encumbered with wind turbine noise and some of the other effects. They decided, for whatever reason, they didn't really state why.
I didn't understand that.
They eliminated that Monday night and promptly.
They changed it to principal or inhabited dwelling, right?
Yeah, principal inhabited structure.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big change in that it definitely impacts people's future use of their property. I don't know what your guys' building requirements are here in Fairfield Township. I know RIGA, I believe you have to have 10 or 20 acres, and I think you have to have 1,000 feet of frontage to even build. So for them, it may be less of an issue if your building requirements are less here. That may mean that the issue of subdivision might be a bigger issue for you. So something to consider in looking at their ordinance here in the future, and take that into consideration. I wanted to ask too, just real quick, up to this point, has the wind company or Sol or Great Lakes Wind submitted like a proposed ordinance to you guys as far as here's what we'd like, or they just said we were interested in building here?
Orisol, I got just an ad about Orisol in an envelope on my desk that was sent to the township, and then the supervisor shared it with me.
Okay.
So that's the only thing that we have officially heard from Orisol.
Okay.
And Great Lakes Wind, yes, not in ordinance, but the president, or Larry Gould, has been here to a couple different meetings, and.
But they didn't formally submit an ordinance like they've done in like Palmyra or RIGA, for example, or they.
No.
They submitted one. Okay. I was just curious of what the case was there. With that being said, then I would like to present to you guys tonight. I've got a couple of copies, and I can transmit the rest electronically to Deb. But this is a copy of the ordinance that the IICC, which is the local group that's been representing the citizens here in a lot of the townships as far as concerns with wind turbine construction. This is basically our proposed ordinance, and what it does is it comes up with a strong set of regulations that enable you to protect your residents while at the same time still opening the door for turbine development. Now, the developers may say that it's exclusionary, but I think that the ordinance errs on the side of protecting residents, and then more importantly, it has some features that allow a matter of choice. Again, I don't know how familiar everyone is with like the RIGA ordinance, for example, where you have a differentiation between participating and non-participating parcels. So that folks that have leased ground in the project, they're able to waive setbacks, and if they want one 1,000 foot from their home, they're able to do that. But your non-participating residences are not unduly impacted. Just a couple things I'll go through here just real quick. In the ordinance, as far as the sound setbacks, you're looking at 35 decibels measured from the property line of a non-participating parcel. I believe the height restriction.
Yeah, that one gentleman last night said it, or Monday night said his was 60 already. That was a lot.
That was the gentleman. Yeah, he lives right adjacent to the ethanol plant, and that is a situation where the planning commission there, I think you could argue, failed in its task in protecting the residents. And I think that's probably important to note too here. You know, we had some comments here tonight about the importance of tax revenues, and there's no doubt that we are in a time when tax revenues are very important to all these communities. But tax revenues do not ever trump the health, safety, and welfare of your residents. That has to be the primary concern in going forward. So a couple other things here. One of the other important things that came out of the meeting here a couple of weeks ago, when there was a sound expert brought in by the IICC, Rick James. He come in and talked about low frequency and infrasound, which are some of the very lowest parts of the sound spectrum that the turbines produce noise on, to the point where it may be inaudible to the human ear as far as being able to hear them, but your body can still perceive them. There is a requirement in this particular ordinance that the wind companies measure using what's called DVC, as opposed to, I think, the normal is a DVA scale. It's a slightly different weighted scale that does a better job at measuring low frequency types of sound to make sure that it's not exceeding the limit. So they might be able to meet a certain audible sound level, but you want to make sure that you're protected on that the low end of the scale.
They added that in. They talked about it.
They did add that in here the other night in Rigo, so that was a step forward. One of the other things that's important, we had been in contact with the folks at WLMB, again with the television station, and it sounds like there were some concerns in the past that I'm not super familiar with as far as the history and how that goes in, but I would make the argument that two wrongs don't make a right, and if there was issues or problems with the way that the WLMB tower was implemented and the impacts that they've had to the community, that was with one tower. Now imagine 60 or 80 is what Warsaw was told me last summer is what they had planned for Fairfield and Ogden Township, and that's not to mention any of the towers that are farther east of here that beyond your realm of control. But let's not make the problem worse. And so WLMB had provided some language, and I think they had transmitted that to the township. I don't know if that was.
We didn't get anything.
It might have been to Mr. Emmons, and it talks about some.
Bonnie, have you seen?
He hasn't given anything.
Some very concrete set of standards and measurements so that television reception is not impacted here in your township. Maybe not so much for Channel 40 because they're right here. They're not going to be impacted as much, but your area is a fringe location for the Toledo area stations. So if you've got towers here on the eastern portions of your township, if you have people that rely on over-the-air television, Toledo markets in the western or northwest portions of your township, areas that might not necessarily be immediately within the turbine areas may be impacted by their ability to receive those signals. So at WLMB Incorporated are some standards as far as measuring that. The wind company has said in the past, well, we don't want to, or we'll take steps to mitigate, and they never get very specific as far as what is an acceptable level of electromagnetic interference. And they try to set some standards, and I believe there is some language in there that talks about testing. And that's another area with sound testing too. Some of the ordinances that we've seen in the past that have different sound levels, and you can't go above this sound level or that sound level, but whatever sound level you set, it's important to have a clear set of standards for the township to use in measuring that sound, so that regardless of what side of the issue we're on, everyone knows what rules are going to be used to measure that sound. So that's another portion of this portion of the ordinance. Another thing I think that was real big, I think, is it's easy to take away. People talk about the impacts of the towers. Shadow flicker. Their technology exists right now where they can shut the turbines off for the 10 or 15 minutes a day that some homes might be impacted by shadow flicker. They say, and I know they do to a certain extent, they map that out ahead of time and kind of try to mitigate that as much as possible. But they have the means to be able to prevent that completely and remove that impact off the table. And by their own admittance, it's not more than 25 or 30 hours of production a year. So why not take that burden off the residents? Your residents don't have any shadow flicker now. And the other important part of that too is it removes the township from being in the position to try to monitor that. And I think RIGA has opened themselves up with a big can of worms because they set a limit at 30 hours. How are you going to measure that? Is a resident responsible then every day for sitting out with a stopwatch going, well, I got 10 minutes today, 5 minutes last week, by October I'm up to 30 hours. Now I submit a complaint. How do you go back and investigate that and take care of that? Where if you front load that process to the wind company and make them responsible on the front end for monitoring that and controlling it and making sure that those shadow flicker events don't happen to begin with, you remove an issue off your plate, your residents are going to be happier, and the wind company is admittedly losing only a minute amount of production. That was probably the main thrust of it. One of the other things that's in here as well that is, I think is worth a look at is a property value guarantee. There's a mechanism in here that it has a limited shelf life, so it's not something that goes on forever. But the concern here being not so much for farm properties. You know, someone with 100 acres, if they've got farm ground and they have a turbine on it, I don't think that their property value is necessarily going to be impacted, although there are some questions as far as we've seen some things down in Van Wert, Paulding County here where they have tile damage and some other things here just in the last couple of weeks and months. As far as yields, that may have some impact. But I think the primary concern here is non-participating residents. The farmers that signed into the project, they know what they're doing. They willingly signed into it. The people you want to protect here and would benefit the most from the property value guarantee are your small parcel owners. The people that live out here that have 2, 5, acres and a little homestead that they've purchased at some point. What it does is it says that the wind company guarantees the value of their property using a certain set of comparable properties, and it's only good for about 10 years in. So once the project is in place 10 years from now, it disappears. It's just to protect the people that are already living here. People that move in after the turbines are there are not covered by it because they know what they're getting into. It doesn't have, and it basically puts that mechanism on the responsibility of the wind companies. Your township's not responsible for administering any part of it. It just requires that the companies have one in place with the residents to protect the parcel owners. And it's just another thing that you can do. That the wind companies will say it doesn't have any impact on property values. So be it. Let's put your money where your mouth is, and if it doesn't impact them, then they're incurring no risk to do that. So that was another important issue. And then the latter portions of the ordinance are some of the definitions you're very familiar with. And like I said, those standards for measuring sound are laid out in here. And basically, it's a copy of the ANSI standard, Scientific Institute. ANSI does standards for lots of different measurement types of things. So it talks about measuring the sound pressure levels and the things that you would do in doing that. There's a sample, I think, of a property value guarantee in here. That you guys can take a look at, and that would be it. So I just wanted to bring forward this for you guys. I think it's a good way to protect your residents, but like you said, I think that ultimately the people from your township need to come out in one way or another, let you know where they feel, and remember at the end of the day that like I said before, that their health, safety, and welfare is your #1 priority, not the tax dollars. The wind industry right now is very much in a oil rush type of phase. I've seen some people hearken it back to, turn of the last century when the guys were out punching the holes in the ground all over the place and everyone's trying to get the best claims. And I'm sure the environmental practices and everything they were doing back then weren't the best. The wind industry is in much the same spot. The technology is rapidly advancing. Don't let yourself set in a lax standard now, and then 5 or 10 years from now, the technology will be better, we know that, and go, well, man, if we would have just held out, or if we would have had a stronger standard, we could have gotten a new, quieter generation of turbines that didn't impact the residents. It isn't so much that people don't want turbines, they don't want the impacts from turbines.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What have you guys looked at as far as, like, they were talking there about eminent domain?
I'm not aware of any eminent domain issues with the turbines themselves. There may be some eminent domain issues with the power connects, yes, that has the potential for being an issue. And there may be some people that were supportive of the turbine project, but when they find out they're going to have a substation or some of these power installations or more additional poles and stuff that they don't have any control over, maybe not be so enthusiastic.
I'm more aware of it now. When you travel down the road, you see all these huge power lines everywhere.
It definitely makes you more conscientious.
Yeah.
Have any of you been down to
and
Van?
Towers next to highways that could fall.
To Van Wert or Paulding? No. Highly recommend going down there. It's about a 2-hour drive from here. At the beginning of last month, they had 1 turbine up. I think they have 30 up now. They're going at like 1 per day, and like I said, they've we had some people go down there and take some pictures. They had extensive field damage here with the water where the guys cut across the tiles. And people that went down there said these fields are not gonna have a crop this year. There's no way they're gonna crop out this year because of the water damage. So it gives you a good idea though what the impacts are gonna be as far as the roads, the size of the turbine, the whole process. Regardless of what side of the issue you're on, I think it's important for people to go down and just understand what we're getting into. One last thing I want to provide to you guys as a resource. June the 11th at 7 o'clock at the Christian Family Center. June 11th at 7 o'clock at the Christian Family Center. The IICC is going to be screening a movie called Windfall. And it's a 80-minute documentary that was done by a woman from New York that kind of came, worked in the film industry, was someone that generally supported green energy, and her community came under some proposed wind turbines and started looking at the issue and kind of explores what happens to communities, what was told to them versus what they got, and then it kind of looks at some of these other places in upstate New York where they've got turbines and how it's impacted people's lives. Obviously, I think it probably slants a little bit against the turbines, but I think it's probably still an important perspective to see. The wind companies are going to tell you it's all fine and dandy, but I think it's another important side of the issue to see.
When was the film made, or how old?
The film was just.
Because, like you said, everything's changing.
It was. It has not even been released to DVD. This is actually costing us quite a bit of money to have it screened. The film hasn't even been distributed yet. The film's been, it's very well produced. Toronto Film Festival, very high production value, lots of different. We'd actually initially tried to get the director here, but she's going to be over in Europe.
Yes, I've heard about, like when Kevin and the people went around, the older turbines are really noisy, but the newer ones weren't. And there's a lot of difference between the farms they visited.
Well, and even in this case, like you said, I think the turbines that are pictured are going to be in Tug Hill, New York. Those are 400-foot turbines. So the technology may be slightly louder, and that varies depending on the turbine manufacturer.
Right.
It depends slightly on blade design. But the other part of that then is your turbines are going to be 20% taller. So they're going to displace more air. And a lot of my understanding is that the turbine itself, the actual electric capacity generating unit, is not what causes the majority of the sound. The majority of the sound is the air displaced by the 330-foot blade. And that's where the sound issues.
The bigger, the less of them, right?
What's that?
The bigger, the less of them.
No, they're still going to build the same number. The reason they're building 500-foot or just under 500-foot turbines is they're using the Vestas V100, which, if you read the literature for the V100, is a turbine for marginal area wind. Granted, it does feel pretty windy out here sometimes. In terms of wind resource zones, our area was not one of the 5 resource zones that the state of Michigan allocated here about 2 years ago. 2 or 3 of those are up towards like Traverse City, and then there's a very large one in the Thumb area.
We were in the map that was wind here with the Michigan. They did a study. I have a copy of that.
They show a certain amount of wind, but again, it's a secondary wind resource. It's not one of the primary locations. So those types of issues are one of the things that make it difficult to research. Because when you're looking at developments from 3 or 4 years ago, you're looking at 400-footers, and people talk about the BG turbines.
What is IICC?
Interstate Informed Citizens Coalition. A group of local citizens that have been working together to try to raise public awareness, get people to come out and ask questions, to participate in the meetings as much as possible. Almost entirely locally funded. There's been some smears in the paper lately by Great Lakes Wind in particular, accusing us of fiction, accusing us of just trying to stall the project, or trying to deny the county tax dollars. And again, I would say that our position is that residents come first. That has to be the first priority, and everything else is secondary to that. Many of the people that I've talked to in my own particular township have said, you know, if I've got a turbine in the back door, why do I even want to live here? You know, so for many people, again, maybe your smaller parcel owners, it's a huge issue. For people that are involved in traditional farming, it's probably less of an issue. But I know, speaking from Ogden Township, is a hugely contentious issue. We have some very strong conflict of interest issues with our board, with people not recusing themselves from wind-related votes, and as a result, it looks like we're going to have a recall election in August. Unfortunately, it's come to that. So.
How many members are maybe approved, would you say?
I don't have an exact number. In terms of the meetings we've had, people come from one meeting, we've had people come for every meeting. We've had people that never come to any meetings but have given fairly large amounts of money. It's not necessarily that structured, and that's part of it is a community grassroots organization. We're not Great Lakes Wind. We don't have a PR firm. You know, they've got every meeting down there in Riga. They got 2 people from a PR firm. They've got 2 people now, Great Lakes Wind does, that are political organizers. They have, I just talked to the guy Monday night, his name's Bill Scott. He is like their Exelon's political affairs person, so he's a paid lobbyist. He told me he's moving here this summer to work on the issue, and I know that they've got another guy in the area, his name is Joe Kupka, that he's a political organizer, you know, worked on the Obama campaign, worked against some other various conservative people in the past, and I'm assuming going to have him out knocking on doors or something. But it's that versus me and other people showing up at meetings, trying to talk to people after meetings. You know, we don't have unlimited funds, you know, things like that windfall took a lot of people putting in a lot of money. It's only one showing, you know, with a lot of costs associated with that. So.
Could you email me that electronic?
Sure. Of what? Of what?
Of what you got?
Oh, the ordinance.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Certainly. Yeah, I'll send a copy to Deb here, and I can send you one as well. And then, does anyone else have any other questions? Like I said, personally, I go to all the meetings. I was in Riga Monday night. I'm here tonight. Tomorrow night I'll be in Palmyra.
You don't have a life.
I'll be in Palmyra. Friday I'm going up to the Michigan Public Service Commission. You know, one of the other things you'll probably see and you'll hear the developers talk about sometimes, I think it's an important point, is I think Orsal may have proposed 1,320-foot setbacks. I don't remember if they said 1,000 or 1,320. But what they'll say is, look, we're at 1,320. We're proposing a standard that's even more conservative than the state's 1,000-foot guideline. Well then, who come up with that 1,000-foot guideline? I've actually been up to Michigan Public Service Commission, sat in at the meetings. It's a 7-panel board. 5 of those 7 people work in or work for lobbying groups in the wind industry. They're spoon-feeding these townships who are trusting the state government to give you guys decent or at least somewhat fair regulations, and it's not. It's basically what the wind energy industry wants. And you know, we've started going up to the meetings and trying to call them out a little bit more and say the starting point's got to be a little bit more tilted in favor of residents. If communities come out and say we support these projects, so be it. But it shouldn't unduly force them on board. All right, thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.